Today was kind of an odd, I wasn't sure what to do. It was kind of an odd Sunday. We finished up our sermon series a couple weeks ago, and didn't really want to start a sermon series this week with having a couple, next week we're going to have our VBS program, and just kind of wondering what to talk about and reflecting back. And so I went back and was kind of looking through some old sermons that I've done in the past, and came across this passage we're going to, and it's choosing what matters most. And as many of you know, prior to coming here, I had taken a break from full-time ministry. I had burned out in ministry. I kind of had a pretty bad attitude and outlook on what ministry was, and I had thought that being a good preacher meant that I had to do everything. It was a well-known fact in our previous church that if you wanted something to get done in the church, you just talked to Dillon. And so, to say the least, I was busy. As many of us are. But this took a toll on me. It took a toll on our family. We are busy people. And we act as if it's this badge of honor to be busy to the point of getting sick. And we have this problem of never getting enough time for the things that we want to get done. And we especially have a hard time, some, I think, of getting the things done that the Bible tells us are better. So if you would open with me to the book of Luke, starting in chapter 10. And we're going to see what God has to say about our busy lives. It's a familiar passage, I think, to most of us probably, and I think it's a great lesson that we need to consider or maybe even reconsider. And so Luke chapter 10, starting in verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Mary was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made, and she came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." See, the American dream seems to be taking its toll. When busyness fills our life, we feel more stressed. We're actually less productive. We are more run down and tired. We begin to lose joy of life. We can't hear God in our lives. And it's awfully a high price to pay, I think, with a life defined by what the world says we should live. And I think busyness in our lives has given three myths that I want to look at. And the first is, there is not enough time to do everything. How many of you would like just one more hour in the day to get something done? Maybe? The moms are like, yes. If only you had one more hour. But I think the truth of the matter is, this is a myth, because the truth of it is, God has given us enough hours in the day to accomplish what God has designed us to do. So when we come to this feeling, I wish I had more time, it means somebody mismanaged their time. And really there's only two options. There's God and there's you, and I'll let you decide who loses that battle. Because God has given us the perfect amount of time to accomplish His will for our life. The second myth that I want to debunk is that we're just in a busy season right now. Fall is just around the corner, and with change it reminds us that the seasons always come to an end, and we believe that when we accomplish everything that is keeping us busy, life will slow down. If only when I retire, life will slow down. How many of you know that's not true? But today I don't think we have seasons. We have one season, and it's called busy. And it's not the season that's busy, it's the person. And for many of us, we've become busy addicts. We just don't want to admit it. Even when we have the opportunity to slow down, we look for an activity to fill our time. How many of you, when you have a spare evening, go, okay, are we going to work on the house or are we going to work at the office? We can't have downtime. We struggle with downtime. The third myth is that when I'm busy, I'm important. People almost expect us to be busy and overworked. In his book, First Things First, Stephen Covey wrote, it is a status symbol of our society. If we're busy, we're important. If we're not busy, we're almost embarrassed to admit it. Busyness is where we get our security. It's validating, popular, and pleasing. It's also a good excuse for not dealing with the first things in our lives. See, in our passage this morning, Jesus visits two sisters in their home. And one chooses wisely, and the other not so wisely. So now the custom was when you entered someone's house as a guest, your feet would get washed and you would be fed as the guest of honor at the head of the table. And the impression that we get from this text is that Martha was not only hospitable, but she was probably going a little overboard because, well, by golly, it's Jesus we're talking about. But I get this feeling that this Martha was maybe the original Martha Stewart. She was busying herself with some lavender placemats made of yak hair or something crazy like that. But you see, the problem was not the activities themselves that fill up our time. For the most part, these are worthwhile things. We wouldn't call spending time with our family or attending a child or grandchild's event a bad thing. However, the problem is that when we have so many good things in our life, it distracts us from the best thing, our relationship with Jesus Christ. See, Martha shows us this pattern of busyness. See, busyness begins with good intentions. Martha knew her guest and only wanted to provide the best possible experience for Jesus visiting her home. And we're just like her, aren't we? We get started in life, we have good intentions. We have good intentions for our career. We have good intentions for our marriage, good intentions for our kids, for our faith journey. But somewhere, somehow, something gets sidetracked. And once we get sidetracked, what happens is the distractions move in and we just get derailed. And that's what happened to Martha. Look back at verse 40 with me. Luke 10, verse 40. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She was distracted. Think about this. God in the flesh is in your living room wanting to visit with you, and you are so concerned trying to play the good hostess that you stay in the kitchen preparing the meal instead of sitting and talking with him. Martha was distracted by all the wrong things. When you're derailed by distractions, they can appear as priorities. It's not that they aren't good things. It's just that they aren't the best decision given all the options. You see, as the pressure begins to build up, stress increases, the demands grow, and then pity arrives close behind. And because, well, nobody appreciates what I'm doing. I'm just making a good meal here, and it's Jesus, by golly, that's in the living room. But look what verse 40 again, the end of verse 40, what Martha says. Lord, don't you care that my sister left me to do all the work? I didn't have sisters, but I probably would have said that about my brothers. Tell her to help me. Jesus, you're in charge. Get her over here and help me. See, we're not told what the boiling point of Martha was, but do a little imagining. She might have spilled the pot of boiled eggs, which splashed on the date and fig appetizer, which scared the camels who started spitting, and at the same time, the disciples have been asking for refills like it's the local Perkins. Martha is just annoyed. And we get this glimpse that is just too much, and she snaps at Jesus. Which usually, by the way, means you're running on empty. When you have no margin in your life, you have no emotional reserves to pull from, you say and you do things you later regret. Like, Lord, don't you care? I can just hear it in her voice. But I can also imagine Jesus just laughing at her. You could have just had to just chuckle in that moment. We've been there. Your husband doesn't understand the pressure to get the house clean and to take care of the kids. And your wife doesn't understand how much pressure you have at work and what you have to get done. And your boss is just a jerk. And your parents don't understand that school is hard.
Amen.
Oh wait, yes they do. But your boss doesn't understand that you just can't do all these extra projects at work. There's only 40 hours in a week that you get paid for. The problem is that when pressure and pity show up, guess what's just around the corner? Anger and resentment. Lord, don't you care that she left me to do the work? Tell her to help me. You can almost hear that resentment in her voice. Jesus, tell her to get off her bum. Get to work. It's the least she can do. Resentment is a sign of busyness. See, the story of Martha teaches us that busy isn't better. See, the solution is choosing the best thing, which I firmly and wholeheartedly believe is Jesus. The problem is that we've become to believe that everything is important. So we don't choose some things, we choose everything. Most of us haven't taken the time to consider what's really important in our life. And as a result, we elevate things that aren't really that important, and we devalue things that are actually important, and we wear ourselves out in the process. As our culture says that busy is better, but it really isn't, is it? Choosing what's important, I think, is what's key. And I'm convinced that until we learn to choose better, we will always be running on empty. So what then is the better choice? If we have lots of good choices, what is the better choice? Where was Mary? Look back at verse 39. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. You see, why Martha was consumed by all of her busyness and good intentions of trying to be hospitable, just trying to get a meal on the table for Jesus and his disciples. Her sister Mary chose instead to sit in the presence of Jesus and bask in that opportunity. To be able to sit and take advantage of every opportunity to be with Jesus, Mary chose worship. She chose a better thing. While Martha chose to remain busy. You see, Martha was distracted, but Mary was focused. Martha felt pressure, while Mary felt peace because she chose better. While Martha was filled with resentment, Mary was filled with enjoyment. And Mary had her priorities straight. See, Mary appears 3 times in the gospel prominently, and all 3 times she's at the feet of Jesus. Our scripture today is the first time that she's at Jesus' feet. The second is in John 11, and she's grieving the loss of her brother, and she falls at the feet of Jesus. In John 12, the next chapter, once again we see her at the feet of Jesus when she brings perfume and kneels and pours it over his feet as an act of worship. See, Mary got it right. She knew what and who was most important. And my gut says that if you and I had the choice, that we would want to have the heart of Mary. We desire to have that heart of Mary. But we live in a Martha world. You may be even wired like Martha. Some people are just hardwired that way. But even being hardwired that way, in your heart, you want what Mary had. You want to be able to choose what's most important, to be able to choose to be close to Jesus. That's why you're here today, but how do we get there? How do we have a Mary heart? It's great to hear Scripture, but what are you going to do about it? So, there's 2 examples I want to look at in the Bible, and I want to point towards how that we have a heart like Mary. And the first example is the prophet Elijah. After I decided to step away from full-time ministry, I had a pastor friend of mine share these verses with me. And the first verse he encouraged me to read was 1 Kings 19, verse 9. And he said this, he said, read 1 Kings 19. He said, then find your mountaintop. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Well, let's read, and then I'll explain what my friend meant by find your mountaintop. 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 9. This one. I gotta find the right tab. There he went to a cave and spent the night, and at the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. And I am the only one left. Now they are trying to kill me too." And the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face. He went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" What I want you to see here in Elijah's story is Elijah is running for his life. He is the evil queen Jezebel chasing after him, determined that she is going to kill him. And God decides to show Elijah, and therefore I think through us, how he works. You see, there's three large catastrophic things that happen. There's a powerful wind, and then there's an earthquake, and then there is a fire. But God did not show himself to Elijah in these huge events. God instead chose to show up in a little event. He showed up in a gentle whisper. See, God came to Elijah in a moment of peace and quiet. So like my friend said, find your mountaintop. Where is that place of peace and quiet that you can hear God's whisper? I am a firm believer that God still speaks to his children. And we don't hear it because often we are not quiet enough and quite frankly not even listening for it. And if you want to have a heart like Mary's, you have to be willing to quit focusing on these huge catastrophic things that are happening in your life and instead look for a peaceful, quiet place to focus on God and listen for his gentle whisper. The second example that shows us we have a heart like Mary comes from Jesus himself, and it's found in Matthew chapter 11, starting in verse 28. Matthew 11, verse 28 says this, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, God never intended you to be weighed down or heavy burdened. God never intended you to live a fast-paced, frantic life that we have seemed to have chosen for ourselves. He never intended for the church to have something going on every night of the week that we had to attend, or every game that we had to go to, or every concert that we needed to attend. See, God did not build you or anyone else to run 24/7. It's a burden you were never built to carry. Consider the person of Jesus for a moment. It's a perfect model of living. It's the perfect model of scheduling, really. Anywhere in the Bible, it is Jesus, the one who created us. If you think about busyness and hurry in Jesus' life for a moment. Was Jesus a busy man? Absolutely. Was Jesus a hurried man? Absolutely not. If you read the gospel accounts again sometime, I encourage you to read each of them, and you'll be amazed at the things that Jesus was able to accomplish in the lives that he touched. He took time to talk to strangers. He built relationships with his closest friends. He ate with groups of people that he didn't really know. He attended weekly synagogue meetings. He even went to people that didn't want him to be there. He would talk to them. He spent his time with the elderly, with children, with everyone in between. And then finally he came to a cross to redeem mankind. Yet he did this in a space of 3.5 years. So how did he do it? Because his yoke, more appropriately God's yoke, is easy and light. He is a gentle, humble heart. Jesus was able to do all these things because he knew what was important and he chose to focus on those things, not just fill up his schedule with everything that needed to be done. And all this is good information, but practically, what changes are necessary for us to do as Mary did and choose what is better? To choose to sit at the feet of Jesus and not run ourselves ragged, getting to everything that we think we need to get done on our to-do list. I think first and foremost, it always starts with evaluating where you are. I encourage you when you get home, or if you're thinking about it now, there's paper in the pew in front of you. List all the responsibilities that you have. All the things that you have to do, the events that you have to go to, the activities that you show up to, the commitments that you've made. And then once you've passed out and regained consciousness, ask what, if any of these, are merely just distractions. In other words, do any of these activities hinder me from my walk with God? Again, there are a lot of good things. I'm not bashing any number of things that we choose to fill our time with. Majority of them are good things. They're honorable things. But I think what we have to learn here is that we got to figure out what good things are taking away from the best thing. The second thing we need to do is identify our values. In Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5 says this. The purpose of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Earlier this week, I put a challenge out on Facebook about family values. For those of you there, you might have seen it. If not, here was the challenge. I want you to sit down and identify what's important to you and your family. Do this on your own. Do this with your family. I would suggest you take a personal retreat, an afternoon, an evening. For sake, I say, take a day off from work and just evaluate what's important to you and your family. Let God reveal to you what that is important to you. And something that was the challenge I gave, it was a challenge given to me and Ashley, is select no more than 8 family values or personal values that are most important to you. And once you've done that, hang those values up somewhere. You see them throughout the day. Because, quite frankly, it's a great activity, but if you don't follow it, then it was kind of a wasted activity. You see, as you go about your day-to-day life, be intentional about finding teachable moments that you can refer back to those values. Choose what is better. Pursue with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The end of each of the pews is just a little step-by-step process of how to come up with your personal and family values. And you don't have to do this. It's not homework. I'm not going to check you next week. But I would encourage you, it is very eye-opening what is really important to you and to your family. Remember, busy isn't better. Choosing better is the way of life without busyness. And maybe the most spiritual and God-honoring thing you could do this week is to say no to some of those good things of your life that are distractions. And again, they're not evil things. Martha's duties to prepare a wonderful meal and experience to Jesus was good. But I think she just needed to say no to busyness so she could say yes to Jesus, which is the better option. Andy Stanley, a famous author and preacher, wrote a book called Choosing to Cheat. And the idea is who wins when family and work collide, but I think it applies to everything in life. See, the idea behind this book is that every time you make a decision, you're cheating something or someone. So when you say yes to staying late to work, you just cheated home. Or when you say yes to watching NCIS, you cheated a friend out of a soul-nurturing conversation that you might have had. See, Martha said yes to work. She cheated herself out of being at the feet of Jesus. We choose who we're going to cheat by the decisions and the commitments that we make. So let me ask you the question, who and what have you been cheating lately in your life? The last practical step is get an accountability partner. If you don't have somebody that holds you accountable, I would encourage you to find someone who will. Identify who you are. Help them name your distractions. Even claim a little bit of stake on telling you how it really ought to be. To have someone who is willing to maybe slap you around a little bit and wake you up when you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Who is that spiritual brother or sister that you can share life with? Then give them permission and authority to question what you're doing and let them do the same for you so you can hold them accountable. Where have you allowed distractions to come in, and what steps are you going to take until the next time you can get better? See, you never take steps you need, and you never get better unless you have someone to help you along the way. The Christian walk was never intended to be done alone. It was meant to be done together. See, at the end of the day, it would be great to hear the voice of Jesus say, as he said to Mary, "You have chosen what is better." Being a follower of Christ is choosing what is better. And what do you need to choose to say no to today, this week, this month, this year? Know this, we are only as busy as you choose to be. Just imagine what your life might look like if you had some breathing room in your schedule. Imagine what it would look like if you had space for significant relationships. If you had time to choose what matters most. And I want to have a little object lesson to put this all in perspective. And I want to, I know, I'm going to make this a little longer, I'm sorry, but I think this is cool. I need little Hank up here. I was going to have Chance come join me, but this is why you call ahead to Mom before the day of. But we're going to imagine. Wyatt, come stand in your brother's place. It won't quite be as effective, but it'll work. And then Scott, I need you up here as well. You can just kind of stand to the side. Everybody loves jelly beans. So, I want to look at only Saturdays. So in your mind, we're talking about just Saturdays. So the average lifespan of an Iowan is 80 years. And so that is 4,160 Saturdays in the average lifespan of an Iowan. So what is a typical activity on a Saturday? Anybody? What do you do on a Saturday? When you have a Saturday, what did you do yesterday? We'll just go with that. Make it easy.
I played video games.
You played video games. What did you guys do? I went camping, and I went to a wedding. Spent time with family. What did we do yesterday?
We risked our lives on a motorcycle.
We risked our lives on a motorcycle. I heard that story. So, what is the big deal of spending Saturday doing any of these things? Not really a big deal, is it? But I want to put something in perspective to you. Henry here is 4 months old tomorrow, I believe, right?
2
Yes. 4 months old. But even at this young age, Henry has lost 18 Saturdays. Gone. Never to be returned. So it doesn't seem that much, that's only 0.5% of his Saturdays. If he lives to be 80 years old, on this illustration, we're living to 80 because that's the average. So he still has 4,143 Saturdays to go. He's good. Okay? Chance is 14, so look like your brother. I don't know. Put a dorky smile on or something. So Chance, I guess, does he get to choose what he does on Saturday? For the most part. Does he kind of get to make his own decisions? Okay, so at the age of 14, for the most part, you get to choose what you do with Saturday. So at the age of 14, Chance has already lost 728 Saturdays. Gone. At 14, he has already lost 728 Saturdays. So that seems a little more significant. 17.5% of his Saturdays are gone. But see, I'm 30, and so I have already lost 1,560 of my Saturdays. But what's one Saturday? I mean, so I went camping. Oh, I went to a wedding. I played video games. Never to be back. Never to be back. Not to be mean, but this is where it kind of hurts. Scott, you're 62. 62 years old, still a young man by many accounts. Scott has a lot of years left. Really, honestly, he does. Scott has lost 3,224 Saturdays. Between me and Scott, there are 1,664 Saturdays that Scott has already lost. We're at a total of 3,224. 77.5% of Scott's Saturdays are gone. For good things. We hope. So that leaves, here you go, Scott. You have 936 Saturdays left. Wow. It's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it? So those of you who are over 80, I don't know if anybody in here yet. Have we, Lawrence? Have you hit 80 yet? Yes. So we have blessings in the room. It's just a simple illustration. You know, God gives us many things, but I want this. You guys can sit down. I'll quit embarrassing you. But what are you choosing in life? Are you choosing to do just the good things and keeping busy? Or are you being like Mary and choosing what's better and sitting at the feet of Jesus Christ? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for a time to come and hopefully be encouraged and to realize how important it is to follow you and to seek after you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We love you and praise you, Lord, and we just thank you for the days that you have given us, and I pray that we would hopefully maybe reevaluate the days that we have to come, that we would seek you first and foremost in everything we do and say, that we would not be so busy that we just get worn out and tore down, that we don't enjoy life and laugh a little and fall before your feet and worship you. Thank you for Christ, his sacrifice, because without him, this would kind of be a silly point to make. It's in his name we pray. Amen.